I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you are standing at the absolute ultimate threshold, like you've reached the very edge of existence.
Right, the actual boundary line between life and death.
Exactly. The world you know, the people you love, all your memories, they're all behind you. They're fading out like a movie screen going dark.
And ahead of you is just the void.
Yeah, the great unknown. And it is incredibly disorienting. I mean,
Mhm.
it's fundamentally terrifying because it's the one place no one has ever returned from to give you a map.
It is absolute profound darkness.
But then, stepping out of the shadows, someone, or maybe something, is waiting for you. And they aren't holding a gavel. They aren't there to judge you.
Right, they aren't weighing your sins, at least, not yet.
No, they're just there to show you the way. So who is that figure? Like, what do they look like?
It's arguably one of the oldest and most profound questions humanity has ever asked itself.
Because faced with that absolute terror of the unknown void you just described, our ancestors across the globe kind of collectively decided something crucial.
They decided we shouldn't have to make that final journey alone.
Right. The human mind simply could not accept the idea of stumbling into the dark, completely blind. We needed a guide.
We desperately needed someone to hold the lantern.
And today, we're going to figure out exactly who those guides are. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore this incredibly universal archetype.
The guides of souls.
Yes, we are pulling from ancient mythological texts, dense anthropological research, global folklore, and even, honestly, analyses of modern pop culture.
Because we want to look at how different cultures, separated by massive oceans and thousands of years, came up with these remarkably similar figures.
Yes, similar but fascinatingly distinct figures to literally hold our hands in the dark.
The goal today is really to demystify these complex mythological roles.
So whether you are a curious student prepping for a literature class or just trying to wrap your head around ancient beliefs,
Or if you're just a lifelong learner fascinated by human psychology, we are going to break down how these ancient entities still shape the way we view mortality, transition, and grief today.
okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand this global phenomenon, I want to start somewhere completely unexpected.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, I think we first need to look at one of the most famous and honestly one of the most misunderstood figures in modern pop culture.
We need to talk about the Japanese Shinigami.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know a lot of you listening have probably encountered them in anime or manga, but the real historical story is infinitely more complex than a cartoon character with a notebook.
It really is. The cultural evolution of the Shinigami is a perfect starting point for us. To truly grasp what they are, we have to break down the linguistics.
Let's do it.
So the word Shinigami is a composite of two Japanese terms. You have shi, which translates to death,
Right?
and kami, which translates to God, spirit, or, a divine force.
Let's pause right there.
Yeah.
Because that word kami trips up a lot of Western audiences.
Oh, completely.
Like when someone raised in a Western Abrahamic tradition hears the phrase God of Death, they almost always picture an omnipotent, capital G, God.
Right. Sitting on a throne, making these massive unilateral decisions about life and death.
Like a CEO of the underworld.
Yes, exactly. But in the context of Japanese polytheism, specifically Shintoism, a kami is not an all-powerful creator deity at all.
It's not a supreme being standing outside of nature.
No, it's better understood as a higher spirit or a localized presence. It's a ruling force that actually inhabits the natural world itself.
Because the Shinto worldview is deeply animistic.
Precisely. There are kamis of ancient mountains, of rushing rivers, of particular old-growth trees. There are even kami of abstract concepts.
So a Shinigami is essentially a spiritual presence whose specific domain or its specific function happens to be the transition of death.
Right. They aren't ruling over death as a kingdom. They are a manifestation of the process.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. When I think of Japanese mythology, my mind goes straight to the foundational ancient texts.
The classics.
Yeah, I think of the Kojiki or the Nihon Shoki, things written in the 8th century.
Right.
So I spent a long time digging into the research, looking for the ancient origins of the Shinigami, expecting to find them walking alongside the creators of the Japanese islands. But they just aren't there.
They are completely absent from classical Japanese mythology. It's wild.
It really is.
If you read those 8th century texts, you will absolutely find gods associated with the underworld, like Izanami, who becomes a goddess of the dead after this incredibly tragic descent into the shadow realm.
Right. She's there, But not a dedicated reaper.
Exactly. This specific concept of a death god, a dedicated reaper of souls who comes to the surface to fetch people, that is a relatively modern invention.
Which is mind-blowing.
It really didn't emerge in the cultural consciousness until the Edo period, and that only spans the 17th to the mid-19th centuries.
So how does an entire culture just invent a new death god in the 18th century? Like, what was happening in Japan at that time to necessitate that?
Well, the Edo period was a time of unprecedented peace and explosive urbanization. After literally centuries of civil war, Japan was unified.
Right, the Tokugawa shogunate.
Exactly. So you have the rapid growth of these massive, vibrant cities like Edo, which is modern-day Tokyo, along with Osaka and Kyoto.
And with urbanization comes the rise of a wealthy merchant class.
And even more importantly, a booming popular culture. We are talking about the golden age of kabuki theater, woodblock prints, and ningyo jewelry.
Which are those highly sophisticated traditional Japanese puppet plays, right?
Yes. And the theater seems to be the exact birthplace here.
Okay, so I was reading about this brilliant playwright from the early 1700s named Chikamatsu Manzaemon. He is sometimes called the Shakespeare of Japan.
He absolutely was.
And a recurring, deeply tragic theme in his plays was the shinju, right?
Mm-hmm.
The love suicide.
Right. Chikamatsu's plays were perfectly capturing the intense social pressures of the time. The Edo period had these incredibly strict social hierarchies and obligations.
They called it giri, right?
Yes, giri. And that strict duty often clashed violently with personal feelings and desires, which were known as ninjo.
So you get these star-crossed lovers.
Yeah.
Maybe a merchant and a courtesan.
Exactly. And when they found themselves trapped by these societal rules, with absolutely no way to be together in life, they would choose to die together.
Believing they would be united in the next life.
Right. And when Chikamatsu wrote about these lovers, he used the word Shinigami to describe the force pulling them toward the tragedy.
He would write these poetic lines where the characters felt like they were possessed by a god of death,
Yes.
leading them to the riverbank to end their lives.
Yes.
But I'm hung up on how literal this was meant to be.
Yeah.
Like, did the audience watching the puppets think a literal demon was whispering in these characters' ears, or was it something else?
Anthropologists and literary historians debate that exact point constantly. But the consensus really leans toward Shinigami functioning primarily as a profound poetic metaphor.
A metaphor for what, exactly?
It was a way to externalize the inescapable pull of despair. Imagine the intense, crushing psychological pressure that would lead two healthy young people to take their own lives. In a deeply spiritual society, that impulse felt almost supernatural. Naming it Shinigami gave a physical shape to the fleetingness of life and that chaotic, consuming nature of depression.
So it starts as a metaphor for fatalism and despair in puppet theater, but fast forward to the 19th century, and the Shinigami morphs again.
It does. It becomes an actual, literal character you can interact with.
And the transition point seems to be traditional Japanese storytelling.
Specifically, Rakugo. You are referring to the legendary performances by the storyteller Sanute Enko in the late 19th century.
Yes, Rakugo is such a mesmerizing art form.
It really is. It's this comedic theatrical monologue where a single storyteller sits on a cushion on a stage, using only a paper fan and a small cloth as props, and voices multiple characters.
And Enko performed a wildly popular story simply titled Shinigami. But the most mind-blowing detail about this story is its origin.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Because Shinigami wasn't some ancient Japanese folktale that Enko just brushed the dust off of. It was an adaptation of a Western fairy tale.
Right, which highlights how incredibly porous and adaptable human culture really is. Enko had encountered an adaptation of a story collected by the Grimm brothers in Germany.
This story is called Godfather Death.
Yes, which had also been influenced by Italian opera. Because Japan was opening up to the West during the Meiji Restoration, European literature was just flooding in.
So Enko took this distinctly European Grimm's fairy tale, completely stripped away the Western aesthetics, and localized it perfectly into the back alleys of Edo.
He localized it seamlessly.
I love how the story plays out. It's so dark but brilliant. In Enko's version, you have this absolutely destitute Japanese man who is drowning in debt.
He's contemplating suicide.
Yeah. And suddenly a Shinigami appears to him. But the entity doesn't strike him down. Instead, it offers him a highly lucrative career change.
It tells him how to become a miracle-working physician.
Yes, and the Shinigami reveals the hidden mechanics of human mortality through this profound visual metaphor.
Right. It takes the man to an underworld space and shows him that every single human life is tied to a burning candle.
So some candles are tall and burning really bright.
And others are just tiny stubs flickering and melting into a puddle. And when the wax runs out and the flame dies, the person dies.
The Shinigami gives the man the ability to see these death spirits in the waking world. And the rules are incredibly specific.
Very strict rules.
The man can cure any sick patient by reciting a specific chant, but only if he sees the Shinigami sitting at the foot of the patient's bed.
Because if the spirit is at the foot of the bed, the person's candle still has wax.
Right. But if the Shinigami is sitting at the head of the bed, near the patient's pillow, it means their candle is almost entirely blurred out. Death is absolute, and the man must refuse the job.
And for a while, the man follows the rules perfectly. He becomes fabulously wealthy. He cures the curable and walks away from the doomed.
But eventually, human greed interrupts the natural order. He is offered an astronomical fortune to save a wealthy merchant.
But when he arrives, the Shinigami is sitting at the head of the bed.
The death is ordained. But the man just wants the money too badly. So he comes up with a plan that is, objectively, a terrible idea.
You just do not try to trick the cosmic order.
No. He waits for the Shinigami to doze off, and he gathers some strong men to literally lift the patient's mattress and spin it 180 degrees.
It's so audacious.
Suddenly, the Shinigami is at the foot of the bed. The man recites the chant, banishes the spirit, and saves the patient.
The trick works, but the cosmic blowback is immediate. The Shinigami is furious at this absolute violation of natural law.
So it drags the man back down to the cavern of burning candles.
And the spirit points out the man's own candle. Because he cheated fate and extended a life that was supposed to end, he inadvertently traded away his own lifespan.
His once tall candle is now just a tiny, rapidly melting stub about to go out. And the ending of the Rakugo performance is legendary.
The physical performance of it is just brilliant.
The Shinigami hands the terrified man a new, unlit candle. It tells him he can save himself if he can transfer his dying flame to the new wick.
But the man is shaking so violently from fear that he fumbles it.
He drops the candle, the tiny flame is extinguished, and the storyteller on stage suddenly slumps forward, dead. The lights go out.
It is a masterclass in theatrical tension, but beyond the entertainment value, Enko's story cemented the specific nature of the Shinigami in the Japanese consciousness.
Notice what the Shinigami did and didn't do in that story.
Right, it didn't murder anyone, it didn't act with malice.
No, they are a fluid category of spirits that act as inviters or verifiers.
They show up to ensure that a person dies exactly at their appointed time when their literal and metaphorical wax runs out.
They're essentially cosmic middle management. Like, they don't make the rules, they just enforce the schedule.
Exactly.
But the imagery evolved again, didn't it? Because after World War II, Japan experienced this massive influx of American and European media.
It did. The visual language of death experienced a dramatic cross-pollination during that time. The Western iconography of the Grim Reaper, the skeleton wrapped in a black cloak holding a scythe. That aesthetic merged with the Japanese concept of these spirit bureaucrats.
Wait, so you're telling me this ancient-seeming Japanese death god is actually a modern remix of local folklore, Western fairy tales, and post-war pop culture? It's like finding out our modern image of Santa Claus was popularized by a soda company.
That is a remarkably accurate analogy. Yes, it's entirely a hybridized concept, which gives birth to the Shinigami we see in modern pop culture today.
Like an anime such as Death Note, where the Shinigami are these bizarre, grotesque, otherworldly creatures who sit in a decayed realm, extending their own lives by writing human names in magical notebooks.
They are literally doing paperwork.
Yeah, or in Bleach, where they are depicted as supernatural samurai wielding swords called Zanpakuto to purify corrupted spirits. They maintain the balance of souls between the living world and the afterlife.
What's remarkable about those modern, stylized depictions is that despite the magical weapons and the elaborate costumes, they retain that core Edo period function.
They are managers of fate.
Right. They are facilitating a transition. So, while the term Shinigami is uniquely Japanese, heavily layered with theatrical history and Western fairy tales, the actual job they perform is universal.
Which pivots us perfectly to the broader global framework. We've looked at the Japanese iteration, but now we need to define the foundational concept that the Shinigami belongs to.
We need to talk about the psychopomp.
Yes, the psychopomp.
It is the master key to understanding ancient beliefs about death.
The word itself is fantastic. It derives from ancient Greek, right? Psyche means soul, breath, or spirit, and pomp means guide or conductor.
Right, so a psychopomp is quite literally a guide of souls.
And their fundamental role across almost every single culture that has ever developed this concept is beautifully specific.
Psychopomps do not judge the dead. They are not magistrates or executioners.
Right. They don't weigh your moral failings or decide if you have earned paradise or a realm of torment.
No, their sole dedicated task is transit. They provide safe passage across that disorienting threshold we talked about at the beginning of the show.
Okay, I think the best way to visualize a psychopomp is to think about the ultimate chaotic airport experience.
Oh, I like this.
Imagine you've just landed in a foreign country. You don't speak a single word of the language. The terminal is massive, the architecture makes absolutely no sense, the signs are all blank, and the PA system is just white noise.
You are completely overwhelmed and paralyzed by anxiety.
Exactly. You don't need a judge to tell you if you packed your bags correctly. You absolutely need a transit guide to take your elbow, point down a hallway, and say, your terminal is this way, stick with me.
That really captures the profound vulnerability of the newly deceased. The transition from life to whatever comes next is universally viewed by ancient cultures as perilous.
Because the soul can get lost.
It can wander forever. To prevent that, cultures invented guides uniquely suited to navigating darkness. Look at shamanic traditions across the world.
Right.
They frequently conceptualize psychopomps as specific animals because animals possess senses that humans lack.
Yeah, like how many Native American traditions hold a deep reverence for the owl as a psychopomp, which makes perfect biological sense. It's a nocturnal predator that can see perfectly in the pitch black.
Exactly. If you have to navigate the ultimate darkness, you want the guide that evolved to thrive in it.
That's so true.
Similarly, various Celtic and Nordic traditions viewed the fox or the hound as guides. These are liminal creatures.
Because they live on the edges of the forest.
Right, slipping effortlessly between the wild, unseen world and the cultivated world of human settlements. They are boundary crossers, making them perfect metaphors for crossing the ultimate boundary.
One of the most beautiful examples I found in the research was from the Labrador Inuits in northeastern Canada. The environment there is incredibly harsh, and the winter nights are long and unforgiving.
So what do they use?
They didn't just look to animals, they looked to the sky itself. They viewed the aurora borealis, the northern lights, as actual physical torchlights.
Oh.
Yeah, they believed those swirling colors were lit by the spirits of their ancestors, holding torches to actively guide the souls of the newly deceased through the freezing darkness of the night sky toward the afterlife.
That is stunning.
Just imagine looking up at that incredible, terrifying, vast light show and finding that level of profound structural comfort in it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of human psychology, we really have to ask ourselves, why did humanity invent these figures?
Yeah, why do we see psychopomps on every continent, in every era, from the tundra to the desert?
It comes down to the architecture of the human mind. The brain fundamentally struggles to process absolute nothingness. The concept of cessation, of simply ending, is too abstract, too chaotic.
We are storytelling creatures. We desperately need a narrative.
Precisely. The concept of a psychopomp gives death a structured, navigable shape. It transforms a terrifying, chaotic void into a guided journey.
It provides a narrative framework.
And crucially, it doesn't just comfort the dying. It assures the grieving loved ones left behind that the departed are not wandering aimlessly in the cold.
They're being escorted. They're being cared for by a professional.
It's an incredibly elaborate, globally synchronized coping mechanism.
But while the job of the transit guide is universal, their customer service styles vary wildly, depending on the culture that created them.
They certainly do.
Like if we look at Western history, we have two incredibly famous guides, and their vibes could not be more polarized. Let's contrast the benevolent guide with the fearsome reaper.
It is a stark, revealing contrast in how different eras processed mortality. Let's look at antiquity first, specifically ancient Greece and the figure of Hermes.
In Roman mythology, he is known as Mercury.
Right. And most people today casually know him as the messenger of the gods or the patron of merchants and thieves. But in the ancient world, his role as a psychopomp was paramount.
And visually, Hermes is unmistakable. He had the winged sandals, the talaria, and the winged hat, the batassos.
He is fast, he is agile.
And his defining characteristic is that he freely crosses boundaries that are otherwise absolute. Like the gods stay up on Mount Olympus, the mortals are confined to the earth, and the dead are locked in the underworld.
But Hermes has universal clearance. He goes wherever he wants, whenever he wants.
And his tone is vital to understand. Hermes is not a terrifying specter of doom.
No, he is witty, cunning, and conversational. He is the god of language and commerce.
Right.
When he arrives to guide a soul down to the underworld, it is almost a comforting, engaging presence. He brings a sense of enlightenment and order to the transition.
There's that famous myth of Orpheus, the legendary musician who journeys down into the underworld while still alive to save his wife Eurydice,
Yeah.
and who is there in the shadows helping navigate the dangers, facilitating this impossible, rule-breaking crossing. Hermes. He is portrayed as a helpful, almost diplomatic escort.
Hermes represents death in a society that viewed it as a natural, albeit sorrowful, part of the cosmic order. It was a journey to Hades, an established realm with its own geography and rulers.
Death was a relocation, and Hermes was the ideal travel agent to get you there.
Okay, so you have Hermes representing this organized conversational transition in antiquity. But flash forward a few centuries in Europe, and the travel agent gets replaced by something unspeakably horrifying.
The Grim Reaper.
Yes, the Grim Reaper is a completely different entity, born from a completely different collective psychological trauma. The Reaper, as we recognize him today, did not exist in the ancient Greek or Roman worlds.
He emerged vividly in Europe during the 14th century.
And that timing isn't a coincidence at all. The 14th century was practically apocalyptic.
It was defined by the Black Death.
Exactly. The bubonic plague swept across Eurasia and North Africa, killing an estimated 30 to 60% of Europe's entire population.
That number is just staggering.
It was a mass casualty event on a scale that shattered the social, religious, and economic foundations of society. The plague didn't care if you were rich or poor, pious or wicked.
People were dying so quickly and in such massive numbers that priests couldn't deliver last rites, and gravediggers literally couldn't bury the bodies fast enough.
The order of death was entirely annihilated.
And the art from that period really reflects a society losing its mind from trauma.
Heavily. This is when we see the explosion of two major artistic traditions across Europe: the triumph of death and the dance of death, or dance macabre.
Right.
In these artworks, death is no longer a helpful winged god in sandals offering his hand. Death is a skeletal, rotting figure wrapped in a black burial shroud, wielding a massive scythe.
I was looking at descriptions of a famous 15th century fresco painted in Paris at the Cemetery of the Innocents. It depicted the Dance of Death on a massive scale.
Yes.
What's striking is how it shows the Reaper coming for absolutely everyone, forcing them to link arms and dance to the grave in strict social order.
It pairs death with the Pope, then the Emperor, the Cardinal, the King.
All the way down the hierarchy to the abbot, the bailiff, the astrologer, the physician, and finally the fool.
It was a brutal, visceral, visual representation of the great equalizer. The plague proved that all earthly power and wealth were utterly useless in the face of mortality.
The Grim Reaper doesn't converse with you like Hermes. He doesn't negotiate.
No, he is silent, absolute, and relentless. He doesn't gently guide you. He harvests you. He represented the indiscriminate, uncontrollable devastation of the disease.
I have a pointed question about that imagery, though, because it always seemed odd to me.
What's that?
Why a scythe? Like, why not a sword? If you are an artist in the Middle Ages and you want to invent a terrifying weapon for the personification of death, why not a massive broadsword or a spiked mace or a spear? Why arm the ultimate killer with farm equipment?
It is a brilliant, terrifying metaphorical connection with deep mythological roots. The scythe connects back to the Greek god Cronus, who the Romans worshipped as Saturn.
The god of time.
Right, Cronus was the titan of time, but he was also deeply associated with agriculture. His emblem was the sickle or the scythe.
Oh.
A scythe is a specific tool used for harvesting wheat or grain at the very end of a growing season. It cuts down everything in its path cleanly and indiscriminately.
So during the plague, when entire towns were being wiped out in a matter of weeks, that agricultural metaphor was just mapped onto humanity.
Exactly. The Grim Reaper uses a scythe because he isn't murdering people in a malicious, targeted way. He is harvesting human souls when their season on Earth is over.
Wow.
A farmer doesn't hate the wheat when he cuts it down. It's simply time for the harvest. The scythe reinforces the idea of death as a cyclical, sweeping, and fundamentally brutal force of nature that cannot be reasoned with.
It's an incredibly bleak worldview. But whether it's a scythe or a staff, the objects these figures carry are deeply symbolic of the journey itself, which pivots us to the tools of the trade.
Yes, how physical items represent the spiritual journey.
Let's talk about Charon from ancient Greece. He was the ferryman of the river Styx and Acheron, right?
Yes. While Hermes guided the souls down the path to the underworld, Charon operated the skiff that crossed the physical watery boundaries, separating the sunlit land of the living from the gloomy realm of Hades.
But the catch with Charon is that he required payment. You had to have a coin, an obol, or a drachma placed in your mouth.
Right, it became a strict customary burial practice. And placing it in the mouth ensured it wouldn't get lost, serving as the physical manifestation of the deceased's final breath.
And if you didn't have the fare, you were doomed to wander the muddy shores for 100 years. But what blew my mind is that this isn't just a Greek idea.
No, we see an almost identical framework thousands of miles away in the Akan religion of West Africa.
In their land of the dead, Asamando, there is a female guardian named Amokie. And just like Charon, she requires payment.
Yes. Deceased Ashanti women are buried wearing amosi, a specific loincloth, and jewelry.
And anthropologists note that these aren't just decorative. They function pragmatically as a spiritual currency to secure safe passage through the gates.
It is a remarkable anthropological parallel. Two cultures, completely unconnected, independently arriving at the conclusion that you have to literally pay a toll to cross over.
Why do you think that is? I mean, is it just projecting human economics onto the divine?
It goes deeper than economics. It reveals the profound psychological needs of the living by creating a mythological rule that requires a toll, a coin, a specific garment. You provide profound comfort to the living.
Because it gives the grieving family a job to do.
Precisely. It gives them a concrete, actionable task in the midst of paralyzing grief. They are ensuring safe passage when they can no longer physically protect the person.
That makes the tools of the psychopomps themselves make more sense, too. Like Hermes carrying the caduceus, the staff with two intertwined snakes.
Right, symbolizing healing, resurrection, and mediation between realms.
Okay, the toll system makes psychological sense for the families. But what happens when a soul genuinely cannot pay the toll? Or, far more tragically, what happens when the soul is a child?
Right, a toddler wouldn't understand the journey.
Exactly. That's where a very specific type of compassionate guide steps in. Let's introduce Jizo.
Jizo, or Siddhigarbha, is a highly revered bodhisattva in Japanese Buddhism. He is visually represented as a simple shaved monk carrying the ringed staff of a traveling cleric.
And his specific domain is saving souls in hell, particularly children who died too young to understand Buddhist teachings.
To appreciate Jizo, we have to look at the horrors he protects them from. In the Japanese Buddhist underworld, souls cross the Sanzu River.
And sitting at the river is the Datsuba, the terrifying old hag who violently strips clothes from the dead.
She hangs the clothes on the Eryoju tree to weigh their sins. But children, being in karmic limbo, couldn't cross.
They were trapped on the riverbanks, forced to endlessly stack small stones into towers as penance.
And underworld demons, the Oni, would smash the towers down, forcing them to restart.
It's the mythological manifestation of inconsolable parental grief. Until Jizo appears.
Right. Jizo steps in, drives the demons away with his staff, and physically hides the vulnerable children in the wide sleeves of his robe.
He guides them safely across, bypassing the Datsuba entirely. There are incredible legends about him, like from the Rokuhara Mitsuji Temple.
The wig-holding Jizo, who saved a condemned man from hell after he promised to reform.
And the Umemi Jizo, seen in a shared dream by two sculptors, actively suffering in hell to take the place of the condemned.
My favorite is the statue found with fresh mud on its feet.
Yes, because Jizo supposedly walked into the mountains at night to perform burial rites for a poor woman's mother.
It demonstrates Jizo's ultimate compassion, contrasting with the strict rules of the underworld.
Okay, let me get this straight.
Yeah.
If the underworld is a strict legal system, Jizo is like a pro bono defense attorney and a compassionate social worker rolled into one, actively taking the punishment for his clients.
He is the divine loophole. Human empathy found a way to manifest even in harsh, ancient mythologies.
Speaking of legal systems, how does this sprawling Eastern bureaucracy compare to Western judgments?
They are philosophically opposed. The Eastern systems, heavily influenced by Chinese imperial courts, are incredibly bureaucratic.
You have King Enma, or Yama, and the 10 Kings of Hell. Judgment isn't instantaneous.
No, it happens in stages. The 7th day, the 49th day, the 100th day, up to 3 years. And the Jade Emperor oversees the massive cycle of reincarnation.
And they have specialized police, the Haibai Wu Chen, the Black and White Impermanence Guards, to escort the souls to these trials.
What's fascinating here is that this delay allows living relatives to offer prayers and memorials acting as spiritual bribes or character references.
It's literally an afterlife filled with paperwork and appeals. Contrast that with Western or Abrahamic systems, which are binary and immediate.
Right. Azrael extracts the soul at God's direct command, instantly writing and erasing names in a ledger.
Or Anubis in ancient Egypt. He weighs the heart against the feather of Ma'at.
If the heart is heavy, Amit devours it immediately. Absolute annihilation or eternal paradise.
The East focuses on karmic bureaucracy and reincarnation over time, while the West focuses on a final, one-time judgment of moral worth. But while magistrates and toll collectors are intimidating, some psychopomps are actively malicious. We have to look at the dark side of these guides.
When psychopomps blur the line between guide and monster.
Like the Itsuki in Japan. These strangling ghosts coerce the living to commit suicide.
They follow the equilibrium formula. A soul can only leave the underworld if a new one takes its place.
Or the Chulachaki in the Amazon. A shape-shifting trickster with a deformed foot like a deer's hoof.
It lures victims into the deep forest by taking the form of a loved one, effectively guiding them to their doom.
And Celtic mythology has the Cailleach, the Hag of Winter, who brings destruction but guides souls, representing the harsh necessity of death for rebirth.
Even Japanese Buddhism has the Daki, the hungry ghosts who roam free, suffering, and sometimes preying on the vulnerable.
But if they are tricking or forcing you into dying, are they really guides?
This raises an important question. Psychologically, these trickster psychopomps were ways for ancient cultures to explain the inexplicable.
Like sudden tragedies or people getting lost in the wilderness.
Right. They provided a narrative framework representing the unavoidable gravitational pull of mortality.
This brings us to the ultimate takeaway for the listener. Why do these ancient stories still matter to us today?
Because the psychopomp is a universal architect not just for literal death, but for transformation. They guide us through the liminal spaces.
Whether you are changing careers, ending a relationship, or moving to a new phase of life.
The psychopomp represents the psychological need for guidance when leaving the familiar and entering the unknown.
We've seen how psychopomps evolve from animal spirits in shamanic tribes to bureaucrats in Edo, Japan. If psychopomps are born from our need to structure the unknown, what happens next? As we upload our lives to the cloud and explore digital consciousness, will our next psychopomp be an algorithm? Who or what will guide our digital ghosts?
That is the profound mystery of our next transition.
Thank you to every single one of you supporting GL Deep Dives. It truly means everything. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to follow and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Remember, we're just getting started.